afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Mandurah 2020 Artists Forum. My name is Mary Cassotti, and I'm the Group Mandurah Board. We would like firstly to sincerely thank Sherry for hosting us today. We're very much looking forward to May 2020 when the Mandurah finalists will be exhibited here at Stahler Contemporary. So thanks, Cheryl. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the Whadjuk Noongar people. I particularly wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution that they make to the life of this city and the region. You'll notice that we're filming today, today's proceedings, so that the information and the knowledge from today may be shared with regional and our interstate artists. We have an eclectic array of speakers here today to help shine light on the Mandurah Art Prize and its theme for 2020. You'll hear from Father Chris Ross, our curator, Christy Goff, Shula Lazar, to give a Jewish perspective over our Old Testament theme from Mika, Michaela Castledine, winner of the Mandurah 2018 prize, and finally, our friend and Mandurah advocate, Jared McKenna, who will also speak to the theme. We will then host a panel discussion where we welcome your questions, followed by an afternoon tea where we encourage you to initiate discussions with panellists and with one another. So firstly, I introduce you to our longest standing board member, Father Chris Ross, who will provide a brief history of Mandurah and an insight into the process used to come up with the theme for 2020. Welcome, Father.
Thank you. Yes, sometimes we call them old members. Yes, Mandurah has a very complex history. It started in 1984 with a group of committed Christian people, a good number of them Catholic, a good number of them other Christian churches, group, but not terribly large. I think about 6 or 7 people, and I was not one of them. I was still living in Rome at that time. And they started an idea of trying to fill in where other people, what other people weren't doing as far as Christian spreading of the gospel through whatever, art, drama, whatever it might be. And so they started this with a motto, lift Jesus higher. Now that's very broad. So they had at the beginning, didn't lift Jesus higher, but they had seminars, retreats, prayer sessions, even circle dancing at one time, and all kinds of other things, trying to say, well, these are areas that have not been handled, in other words, the people in a Christian context. But one of them also, which I didn't mention, of course, is the Art Prize, which right from the very beginning, the very first one, also had an Art Prize, which at the very beginning was connected with New Norcia, and still is. New Norcia, our paintings, all our winners are permanently stored and exhibited in the art gallery of New Norcia, which is a nice thing to know for winners as well, because a lot of people go through there. Tourist buses stop there all the time, and where it can be seen. But that went on for a couple of years, and these people were really winging a prayer, myself included, in kind of running this. It got more and more difficult. At the first, until 1992, we ran every single year. Then we found that was just too impossible to raise the funds which were necessary and so forth. And so we decided to go every second year. And gradually, some of the other things began to drift away. Some of the circle dancing or the whatever you want to call it, different things, seminars and so forth. There's a lot of other people who are giving seminars and so forth. But the thing came out, the idea came out, that one of our members, a gentleman who's now gone to God, but he said, I go to art galleries and there's no religious art. There's all kinds of art and other things. Now, they're not talking about the Louvre or things like that, because there's plenty of religious art in these places. But in some of the ordinary galleries where you just go to see artworks, very often there's nothing religious whatsoever. Specifically religious, that is. In a certain sense, all art is religious. But I won't go into that. But yeah, so gradually these other things began to fade away, and we were left with one thing, the art exhibition. And all our energies from that time on to now have gone into the art exhibition, which is, as you know, biennial. So there was no general intention to eliminate those things, it's just that it just ended up that way, because this was the thing that seemed to catch the imagination of people and visitors and so forth. Of course, money is a big thing in all of that, and somewhere along the line, we got sponsorship from St. John of God Healthcare System, and they give us $25,000 a year. 1 year is for the prize, and the other year is for the work, the background that has to go into running the show. So that left us with all our energies, thank God, concentrated on this exhibition of Mandurah, the art exhibition. And when we came to do the theme, there's been a lot of different things over the years, because we've been going for a long time, as I said, 1985. And so the group now has had the practice, if I can call it that, of quietly sitting down, even we might say meditatively, and thinking, and perhaps hopefully praying, and then kind of sharing with one another what we're thinking about. And things kind of boiled, and we came up with the theme which we have for this coming exhibition, which I am allowed only to give you the theme itself, because it's going to be discussed much more. But the theme is from Micah, chapter 6, verse 8, to do justice. Only this God asks of you, or something as we begin to. Only this God asks you to do justice, to love tenderly, and to walk humbly with your God. So that's the theme that's going to be there. You'll hear much more about this. So we feel that theme was really chosen collegially. I don't know if you're used to the word collegially. I know in a religious order, I belong to the Servite Friars. We use the word collegially a lot. Together, all together. And this kind of popped up as the theme. So I think it grew out of our thought, our feeling about who we are, what we are, and where we want to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Chris. Our next speaker is Shula Lazar. Shula was born and bred in Melbourne and came to Perth 3.5 years ago to take up the position of principal of Carmel College. It is the top independent school and the only Jewish school in WA. Shula was born into an observant family. Her grandparents fled Poland before the war and settled in Carlton, and like many other Jewish refugees. Her mother converted to Judaism to marry her father, who was brought up in a traditional Jewish home. Shula is the mother of 4 children and the wife to 1 husband. She claims to know nothing about art and can barely draw a stick figure, but is a clear supporter of the arts, and I'm sure her perspective today will be fascinating. Welcome, Shula.
Thank you very much. I also did put in my bio that we have a fantastic art department led by Leanne Maisner, who not only gets the best marks of her students, but she inspires students to be artists, and I think that is really the measure of an art teacher. So, with your permission, Leanne, I am speaking here at this art gathering today. When reading the Bible, it is illuminating to find the meaning of a word from context, and more so, the first context, the first instance in the Bible where this word is used. This is the method that I have used today to interpret meaning and message from the words of the verse from Micha. The verse from Micha starts with a question. Ma tov, what is good? How can we define and recognise that which is good? Does good fall into the realm of subjectivity? Is what is good for me also good for you? The word tov, good, is used repeatedly in the story of creation. At each stage of creation, God takes stock of what he has done and concludes that it is good. So our first understanding of what is good, coming from the story of creation, is that the world, in its pure equilibrium state, is good. There are many instances where human beings deviate from this goodness and create hate, evil, suffering. But the world, as it was created, was and is good. And part of our job is to be partners with God, to bring the world back to Tov, back to goodness. In the words of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, he says, "The flames of injustice, violence and oppression are not inevitable. The victory of the strong over the weak, the many over the few, the manipulative over those with integrity, even though they have happened in most times and in most places, they are not written into the structure of the universe. The structure of the universe is good." The story of creation also tells us what is not good. Lo tov heyot adam levado. It is not good for man to be alone. The phrase of not good is also used by Yitro, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, to describe the way in which he judged the people. The task was too big for one man. Moses had to sit from morning until night without help. It was not good for Moses to judge alone. Human beings are meant to be with other human beings. There is a reason why solitary confinement is a punishment. It is good for man to be with others. It is not good for man to be alone. But in our being with others, we create a challenge. Only alone can libertarianism reign supreme. Only alone can we have unfettered rights. The presence of the other brings a curtailing of individual rights. The tension between the rights of the individual and the goodness found in being with others is answered by what God calls on us to do in this verse from Micha. To do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with God. Justice, in Hebrew mishpat, means retributive justice. It refers to the rule of law through which disputes are settled by right rather than might. Law distinguishes between innocent and guilty. It establishes a set of rules, binding on all, by means of which the members of society act in a way as to pursue their own interests without infringing on the rights and freedoms of others. The word mishpat, justice, is first used in the story of Abraham arguing with God to save the city of Sodom. In this story, God plans to destroy the city of Sodom, and Abraham argues that it should be saved in the merit of a few righteous people. Abraham's definition of justice is twofold. The first is that collective punishment is not just. If the city has some righteous people in it, surely they do not deserve to be punished alongside the wicked. Utilitarianism is trumped by libertarianism. We must value and honour the individual. The second point of justice we learn from this story is that Abraham believes not only that good will prevail, but that the righteous have the ability to enable the wicked to change. If there are a few righteous people in the city, they hold the ability to change the city, change the people in the city. We should not punish prematurely. We need to give people time to repent and the tools to change, to live a better tomorrow. Therefore, to do justice is to value and respect the individual and to believe that we can repent and be forgiven. We all have the capacity to become better and to become righteous. Micha then says that we need to love kindness, chesed. What is kindness? It is usually, chesed is usually translated as kindness, but it also means love. Not love as emotion or passion, but love expressed as deed. The first story in the Bible that talks about kindness is that of Rebekah and Eliezer. Eliezer is the faithful servant of Abraham who has been tasked to find a wife for Abraham's son, Isaac. Although Abraham's only instruction had been that the woman needed to come from his family back home, Eliezer was looking for something more. He planned a test. After his long travels, he stated that if he finds a woman who not only offers him water, but offers to water his camels, then through this show of kindness, this woman would be worthy of marrying Isaac. And indeed, Rebekah passed the test, watering Eliezer and his many camels. She showed love expressed as deed. How did this deed of watering the camels show kindness? Kindness is measured by what we give, without expecting anything in return. Nature, or rather physics, tells us that for every action there will be an equal and opposite reaction. But kindness is above nature. It is done not for the reaction, but purely for the imperative to give to the other. When God created the world and saw it was good, his creation was a one-way action. He created not to get anything in return. He did it because it was good. And so it is with kindness. So to be good, we need both justice and kindness. The beauty of justice is that it belongs to a world of order constructed out of universal rules, through which each of us stands equally before the law. Chesed, kindness, by contrast, is intrinsically personal. We cannot care for the sick, bring comfort to the distressed, or welcome a visitor impersonally. If we do so, it merely shows that we have not understood what these activities are. Justice demands disengagement. Kindness is an act of engagement. Justice is best administered without emotion. Kindness exists only in virtue of emotion, empathy and sympathy, feeling with and feeling for. We act with kindness because we know what it feels like to be in need of kindness. We comfort mourners because we know what it is like to mourn. Justice requires detachment and IQ. Kindness requires engagement and EQ. And lastly, to be good, we must walk humbly with God. We must make space for God to be beside us. We must shrink our ego and let God into that space. God lives in the room we make for him in the human heart. In the beginning, God created the world as a home for humanity. Since then, he has challenged humanity to create a world that will be a home for him. God lives wherever we treat one another as beings in his image. Only with humility can you make space for God, and only with humility can you let in the other and resolve to honour the individual while not being alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Shula. That was incredibly illuminating and empowering, very much so. Our next speaker is our winner from the 2018 Mandela Award. Michaela Castledine is an award-winning artist, a published writer with a degree in applied science and an MA in writing and literature. She's been a professional artist for 25 years, working in paper collage and crocheted sculpture. She's received the prestigious Sculpture by the Sea Scholarship at Cottesloe in 2013, the Sculpture Inside Award Sculpture by the Sea, Cottesloe 2016, and was selected as a 2016 finalist in the Distinguished Bankwest Sculpture Prize. She's represented in many public and private collections, both in Australia and internationally. We've invited her here today as the winner of the 2018 prize and the People's Choice Award with her work, God is in the House. We trust that she has many words of wisdom to share with you about her experience. Welcome, Angie.
I decided to bring a prop today, and then I forgot that I was going to have to hold on to the microphone. So this might go horribly wrong, in which case you can think of this as the kind of comic relief section of the afternoon. Okay. So I've been asked to come and talk about my experience with the Mandala Art Prize as an artist, and particularly on the topic of working with a theme. So imagine your creativity is a bouncy ball. If you leave it sitting on your desk, or you just roll it along the floor, or throw it through the air, nothing much happens. What? Really? It's only when it hits something or someone that all the potential and kinetic energy is released, and it flies off in a new direction. So creativity has to be bounced off things in order to work. Like resistance training, working against something is how you make your creativity strong. Can catch it. It's common to think of a theme in an art award as a restrictive thing, something that stifles your creativity, but it's not. I presume you've all heard someone tell you to think outside the box. People who say this don't really understand creativity, because artists can think inside the box just as creatively as they can outside. Because it's not about inside or outside, it's about the box and using it to bounce your creativity off. And this is where I have to put that down, because actually I didn't bring this sculpture, I brought the box so that I could bounce my balls in it. But see, I've got, you know, there's your creativity, bounce it around inside the box. This is just to wake you up. Of course, as artists, you're always bouncing your creativity off stuff, things that interest you, things that happen to you, investigations that occur to you. But a theme is a kind of a wild card, introduced by someone else. It's not a restriction, it's an opportunity to exercise your creativity in new and unexpected directions. Having said that, last year's Mandala theme just so happened to be a box that fitted beautifully inside the box I was already bouncing around in. So instead of taking me somewhere completely new, it took me deeper in the direction I really wanted to go, which felt immensely satisfying. I had begun an investigation into religious architecture back in 2014 when I travelled to Burma, which is where my mother was born. I stood out the front of the Catholic church where she was baptised, and I looked straight up the road to the enormous golden dome of the Shwedagon Pagoda. I was struck by how much more similar they were than different. I began making stupas and started to think about spires and domes and why those shapes appeal to us, shapes like this one here. I began to think that instead of building those shapes to entice people in, we were building them to entice God in. That these shapes were the best things we could think of to make, and that therefore God would find them irresistible places to live, or at least to visit. Then, as it is often the way with coincidence, I started to see these shapes everywhere. The collection of toiletries on my bathroom shelf, the glassware in my pantry. When I read the theme of the 2018 Mandala Award, all my vague and floating ideas on this topic suddenly had a gravity and momentum. I decided to make a tiny domestic-sized heaven and see if I could entice God into that. I sat in this very artist talk in 2017 next to Steve and next to Desmond Ma and Gordon Mitchell, and they will confirm that I was bouncing. I was so excited that I said to Christy, I'm sorry, but I need to go home now and start making this work. I seriously couldn't sit still on my chair. Now, I'm not saying that this is how it should happen. It had never happened to me before like that, and it may never happen again, when inspiration hits you like an adrenaline shock to your heart, but you know then that you're onto something. I believe that this energy manifested itself in the work that I made. It certainly sustained me through the 6 months of making and planning. I loved every moment of it, and I was so happy that others came to feel the same way about the work as I did. The thing about awards with themes is that you will be judged not just on the quality of your work, but your ability to articulate the theme. I know that sometimes inspiration doesn't come like an adrenaline hit. It can be a series of small, wandering steps that are hard to trace back. Because I'm a poet as well as an artist, I'm used to interrogating my thoughts and feelings and emotions, but I know not everyone is practiced in doing that. But as an artist, can I suggest you try? I know you just want to get on and make the work and worry about what it means later, but if you actually document your thought processes at the beginning, then you'll find writing the artist statement so much easier and also more authentic at the end. I have a whole theory about art that revolves around intention, that art is art because the artist intends it to be art. So I think that if you think about the theme and your intention is to make work inspired by the theme, then ipso facto, that should show in the work. If you take a piece of your work and try to shoehorn it into the theme and rewrite your artist statement to fit, then I think that will also show. Beyond theme, there are a couple of other things I want to mention that I think are useful reminders for artists. I'm sorry if they're also going to be mentioned by other speakers, but they probably can bear repeating. Firstly, the initial round that you have to make it through is purely based on photos. If you don't take a good photo of your work, it won't matter how good it is, it won't get in. My cathedral was made up of 60 individual pieces of glass and mirror. I take pretty good photos of my work, but this piece was really hard to photograph, so I took it to a professional. This meant dismantling the entire thing, carefully packing it all up, driving to the photographer's studio, setting it all up, and then the reverse, taking it home again. It was really a lot of work, but I needed to get a really good photo to show the selectors what the work was like. Mostly, you won't have to do quite as much work as that, but just please make sure you take a good photograph. If the photos are out of focus or they don't capture the work, then you're doing yourself a disservice and making it very hard for the selectors to choose your piece. Secondly, stick to the rules. Read the terms and conditions. If it says put D-rings on the back, then put D-rings on the back. If it says the piece can't be bigger than 2 metres, you don't say, oh, I read that, but I felt like making a piece that was 2.5 because I'm an artist. You won't get in. People think that being creative is about breaking the rules, but it's not. As I said, it's vastly more creative to bounce off, find ways to work with them. Annoying the judges from the start is not going to get you very far. The other thing that particularly applied to my piece, but may be of use to mention, is that it occurred to me that the judges might say, well, I like it, but how on earth do we store it or move it or display it? If you haven't seen my piece, it is in the catalogue that's around there, and you'll see it was quite a complex piece. So I spent about a month building storage boxes. So each of the pieces had its own box. I put together a manual with the help of my very handy husband, clearly showing how to install it, how to dismantle it, how to pack it up, all of those things, how to store it safely. I'm not saying that this is what won me the prize, but I think making sure that you never give the judges a chance to not choose your work is a good idea. I've done some art prize judging myself, and it can be really, really difficult. And if you're trying to decide between 2 pieces which are artistically neck and neck, but one of them has a tiny question mark over one tiny issue, then it makes it really much easier to choose the other piece. A lot of people have asked me if I'm going to submit a work for the 2020 exhibition, but at this stage I haven't really decided to. I haven't had that adrenaline shot that's propelling me towards making work to this theme, but you never know. After this event, something in my brain might just start bouncing.
Thank you, Michaela. That was incredibly helpful. I want to put something in myself, but I'm not allowed to, unfortunately, as a board member. When I asked our next speaker how he would like to be introduced, he simply said, "Jared is my friend." Well, as wonderful as that is, he is so much more, particularly for the Mandela Art Award. Jared is an artist and an activist. He's the teaching pastor at Cornerstone Church, World Vision Middle East and Eastern Europe's consultant on nonviolent social change, the co-founder of the Love Makes a Way movement, the largest faith-based civil disobedience movement in Australia's history, and is the co-founder of the First Home Project, where he lives with recently arrived refugees. As well as Jared's theological studies, he initially studied fine arts at Curtin University and exhibited with David Bowie in MoMA, which I need to ask you about, Jared. Jared was a judge for the 2018 prize and is a much valued friend of Mandela, so make him welcome.
My standard joke for 10-minute talks is giving a preacher 10 minutes is like giving an alcoholic one drink, but I will try and be disciplined. I've often talked about that I think great activists are artists who realise that imagination is our medium. With the 10 minutes we got together, I'd like to explore how the opposite might be true as well, particularly if that art is going to claim to have wrestled with these Hebraic scriptures that some of us refer to as the Old and New Testament. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to read a passage from my Lord, quoting Micah, and put it in context and what it might mean for our art and our world today. Woe to you, you Bible teachers, you self-appointed insiders, you hypocrites. You give 1/10 of your spices, your mint, your dill, your cumin. But you have neglected the more weighty matters of Torah, that of justice and compassion and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat and you swallow a whole camel. N.T. Wright, one of my biggest influences, likes to talk about that the anti-Semitism which is sometimes present when we read the New Testament, it actually undoes the very dynamic that would call us to conversion. See, if we can find another sacrifice, which is the context of Micah 6, what does the Lord require? What should we bring? Should we bring these different sacrifices? Should we even sacrifice our children? And some of us are very quick to go, oh no, we've progressed past that, we'd never do that without putting much thinking into how we relate to the modern warfare state and how we send off our children in practices of war in places that aren't far often from where Micah was actually bringing his message. But if we're to take seriously that this is a text actually critiquing those of us who claim to be either spiritual or not religious, or even those of us who claim to be religious and spiritual, that this is a text that asks questions about us, about what is the ache of God in history. And maybe these demands, these spiritual demands, are not elsewhere and ephemeral. Maybe they're as close as our neighbour and the person who has no place to sleep on the streets of Perth tonight. We're living through an unprecedented ecological crisis, and you're doing art in that context. Our world nations spend more money than we need to end absolute poverty on weapons solely designed to take human life. Yet only 2 chapters prior in the book of Micah, we hear the prophet from the country, not far from what today we would refer to as the Gaza Strip. And his ache is God's ache for a world healed. And he paints a picture that strangely those like Justin Martyr in the early church would say the claim of a Christian is that the Hebraic hope for a world healed is our practice underway. Or to put it another way, that the world that the God dreams of is awaking for reality. So we beat our swords into plowshares. We turn our spears into pruning hooks. We are the people who study no war no more, because we claim that the Messiah is not merely coming, but Mashiach now, in Christ. So what is it to be haunted by a tradition, be it Jewish or Christian, that claims that God hears the cries of the oppressed, but know that Solomon and other kings that we look up to will often use the labour of slaves to build temples in worship of God? This is the strange dynamic that haunts religious people and people of spirituality, that we so easily scapegoat others and blame others. It's those Jews, it's those Muslims, it's those gays, it's those homeless people, it's those dog bludgers. What have you seen in the press today? And what is the strange witness that says not only does God hear the cries of the oppressed, but in the pain-riddled poetry of the 22nd Psalm, we claim that God, God's self, cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? What is it to worship a God who is crucifiable and yet know that love is defined by what we see at Calvary and it resurrects? And how could our art, how could our very lives be haunted by that kind of strange hope that God is in the process of not just responding to the cries of the oppressed, but cries the cries of the oppressed with the oppressed, and then calls us into the kind of transformation that we realise that it is our scapegoating of those who are different, of those who are poor, that crucified Christ. My scapegoating yelled louder than the mobs that Friday. My ability to constantly define justice as me doing justice to others instead of me giving back what was not mine. We meet on stolen land and we claim a story of a God who hears the cries of the oppressed. What does this mean for our art practice? What does it mean to respond? I find it fascinating that Micah's text doesn't say to do mercy and love justice. It says do justice and love mercy. Dom Helder Camara talked about, I feed the poor and they call me a saint. I ask why they're poor, they call me a communist. Joshua Abraham Heschel, that great rabbinical prophet of the 20th century, talked about how his feet prayed as he walked with Martin Luther King in Selma, Alabama. What are our Selmas? I'll finish with this. I had this strange experience after being smuggled into Manus Detention Centre, which some of you have seen the recently award-winning documentary about the footage we got out. 6 years now, our nation continues those scapegoating dynamics, that Micah is really clear that God doesn't desire sacrifice, but healing justice and desires of mercy, and what it is to walk humbly. And I was asked to speak at a Christian gathering. And it was a Christian institution, and I won't name it, under a bad witness protection program. I won't say where or who. But the whole time they wanted to talk about marriage equality. In the question and answer time, the whole time, all questions about marriage equality. They weren't asking from perspectives because they themselves were same-sex attracted. They were asking from the perspectives of what it is to dictate the desires of our neighbours instead of what it is to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. If our art is to wrestle with the God that Jacob wrestled with, it must ache with God's desire for healing justice. It must be shot through with a passion for mercy as if it could heal us. And it must come from a place that doesn't strut that I have special access to God, but walks humbly, doing what former Archbishop Rowan Williams would talk about, that mission is finding out what God is doing and then just joining in. My hope is in terms of Matthew 23:23, our Lord quoting Micah, in terms of Micah in 715-ish BC, that you will be haunted by that same ache, not by doing injustice, not by loving indifference, and not by strutting like we have some special access, but undergoing that love, that Calvary-shaped love, that calls us to witness to God's dream for all of creation, as if it was our waking reality. Let me quickly pray for us. Lord, would you haunt us with a hope that is wider than the pressing problems that we face in our world today. Make us those who get caught up in what you're doing in ways that are humble, where we desire mercy, and we just roll up our sleeves and get on with the business of doing healing justice. Pray that the words that have been on my lips and the meditation that has been in our hearts will be something that is pleasing to you, and that we might discover that great art, like great activism, is in response to the ache of the world that would otherwise be indifferent or numb to. Amen.
Jared, inspired and challenging words for us to ponder. Finally, today we will hear from our amazing curator, Christy Goff, who will give you an overview of the benefits of being selected as a finalist and a bit of an overview of the process of entering. Christy.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you so much to all the speakers that came today. You've really given us some lovely things to think about, and from the curator's perspective, Macaulay words of wisdom. Try not to make it difficult for me, please. Okay, so now that we've all been inspired, and I think everyone might need a few moments once we finish just to absorb all the information that we've received, particularly from Jared and Shula. Very much inspired by what you both had to say today, so thank you very much. I'm here to provide all the nitty-gritty technical details about how to get involved. Okay? So what are we looking for? As you heard from Father Chris at the start of today's proceedings, the aim of Mandala is to bring a Christian view into the art world and to provide artists an opportunity to create work with a Christian focus. Artists have a unique view of the world, and it's one that we want to nurture and support, and so that's why we have the Mandala Art Award. We want artists to show us their vision of the theme in a contemporary manner. It can be in any visual art form, and artists from all backgrounds are not just welcome but encouraged to enter, as we want to see a range of different points of view. There's so many different ways that you could look at this theme. It's going to be really amazing to see how people interpret it and articulate it in a visual format. And as part of our commitment to encouraging people from all backgrounds to enter, we provide events such as today, which we will be uploading to the interweb later in the week, so that people from regional and interstate locations can also share the information that we have here today. But also on our website we have a range of insights so that those who don't have a Christian background can be well informed and make a really conscious decision about what they're going to do as their artwork. So let's go through the benefits of being part of Mandala. Let's start with the real big one, the prize money. Because you know what? Artists, we need to nurture them, and financially and in other ways too. So thanks to our many sponsors, but our main one is St John of God Healthcare. We have a $25,000 acquisitive prize. And that winning artwork will become part of the Mandala Art Collection, which will be sitting alongside the likes of Brian McKay, Julie Dowling, John Paul, Ron Gombok, Paul Captain, Thea Koenig, and of course the lovely Michaela. And that's to name just a few. The Mandala Art Collection is kindly cared for and exhibited at the Norcia Museum and Art Gallery, home to arguably one of the most significant contemporary Christian art collections in Australia. We then have the Patricia Toohey Painting Prize, and that's worth $5,000 for the most outstanding painting of the exhibition, and it was named after one of our founding members, Patricia Toohey, who took ill during the planning of our last award, so it's a very special one to our committee. And we also have a further 2 highly commended awards, which will receive $5,000 each, and the artist who was voted the most popular in the People's Choice Award will receive $2,000 from the Benedictine community of New Norcia. So that's all up $42,000 that's available for artists to enter this award. Now, Mandala is a bit different in a number of different ways. In one of those is that we offer multiple display opportunities. So finalists will be displayed here at Starla Contemporary for 3 weeks, but then once we finish this exhibition, a selection of artworks will be chosen to go on tour, and they will go to New Norcia Museum and Art Gallery, St Mary's Cathedral in the city, and also to St John of God Healthcare campuses in Western Australia. We try to tour as many works as practical, depending on the touring venue's capabilities, and rest assured that each of those venues have professional staff to install and look after your artworks while they're on display. We also have the potential for multiple sales during the exhibition. We invite a range of potential buyers to the exhibitions, including our sponsors who have a particular interest in Christian art. So I think one of the barriers for some artists is that they feel that if they make a work that's a Christian artwork, that if I don't sell it at this award, what am I going to do with it? And rest assured, we do try to attract as many potential purchasers as we can to the award. So including our major sponsors, St John of God, who always support us by purchasing artworks, and also, as I say, our other sponsors such as church groups and organisations. And we've also been very lucky to be approached on a number of occasions now by other organisations after the exhibition for commissions. So in particular, Paul Captain, who was our 2016 winner, he was approached through us by St Joseph's College in Sydney, and he ended up being commissioned to do 2 life-size sculptures for their school there. So it was really quite an amazing commission that came through because of his exhibition of his work in Mandala. Now the process. To enter the Mandala Art Award, you need to complete the entry form, which is on our website. It's a completely online process now, and including the payment of the entry fee. Entries are limited to 1 work per person, and here we are, Michaela, the details. No larger than 150 by 150 centimetres, including the frame. 3D works no larger than 120 centimetres in any direction. Now, we would love to have amazingly huge pieces of artwork, but we do want to try and exhibit as many artworks as possible, and so that's why we do have a limitation on the sizes. Video works are to be a maximum of 4 minutes, so we do encourage multimedia works as well. Artworks to be hung must not exceed 15 kilos, and 3D works must not exceed 50, which if you're transporting works, that's always a key consideration, but it's also for the staff that help install and transport the artworks too. It's for our health and safety as well. So the artwork must clearly demonstrate the theme, be the original work of the artist and not infringe on copyright, be executed entirely in the 12 months prior to the award, and not have been previously exhibited. Now when you do your entry form, we will ask for between 2 and 4 images of your completed artwork, and file sizes are up to 5 megabyte each. We'll ask for an artist statement, and that's what is this work about? Tell us about it. What was your inspiration? Show us the points of interest in your artwork. An artist biography, so tell us about you as an artist, and often there's some confusion between those two bits of information that we're after. So you want something about the artwork and something about you. Now that information will be used in the selection process, and if you're shortlisted, will also be used in the catalogue as well. So make sure those artist statements are really clear, and make sure your photographs are amazing. Maybe I think Michaela's experience was quite an extreme one, going to all the trouble that she did. But it is well worth it, and when those photographs came through, I could see that it's going to be an amazing artwork, so it's really worthwhile making sure you take the time to get really good images. Now, because your artist statement and biography are going to be used for the catalogue, please make sure you proofread it, maybe write it in Word, make sure it fits in with the size restrictions that we have in place for those. You know, check your spelling mistakes, your grammar and those sorts of things. Just makes your work look more professional and considered. Now there is a selection process, and all artworks will be assessed by the selection panel, which consists of 2 reputable arts professionals and 1 theologian. The panel can only assess your application based on the quality of the material that you provide. And they will consider your response to the theme, the visual and aesthetic impact, the technical skills and thoughtful application of media, and your compliance with the terms and conditions. A second judging panel, also comprising of 2 arts professionals and 1 theologian, will choose the winners. And in 2018, these judges were Rick Spencer, the curator of the Fremantle Arts Centre, Anne Ryan, the curator at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, and also the curator of the Archibald Prize, and theologian Jared McKenna, teaching pastor at Cornerstone Church, amongst many other things. So just to give you a sense of the quality of judges that we do engage with, to make sure that we have a really clear process and judging process. Now, important dates. Closing date is not until the 24th of February. Sounds like it's miles away. Trust me, it's really not. And the amount of entries that we have on the 24th of February, or whatever the closing date is, crushes our system. So please, maybe even like the 22nd of February. It'd be great, you know? And it just gives me the sense that maybe there is going to be some entries the week before, because I think we had about maybe 50 entries the week before the entries closed, and then you ended up with a huge pile come through in the last 24 hours before closing. So try and plan ahead is my recommendation, because you do need to make sure that you're responsible for making sure that your artwork does upload to the website in time, okay? Artists that we then go through our shortlisting process, and we will be advising the outcome for the finalists within 3 weeks of that closing date. And delivery of artwork will be on Tuesday the 12th of May, ahead of the opening night on the 15th of May. Okay. Now, in addition to the lovely speakers that we had today on the theme, Ghost Library actually came in contact with us, and they have offered for anyone who's interested in doing further research on the Mandela Art Award that they can come along to their library and come and see their collection there, which is usually restricted to members, but they've offered that to anyone that's interested in the Mandela Art Award as well. Okay, so if you'd like their details, please let me know. We'll be sending out some information through our mailing list in the very near future. So yeah, that's pretty much it for all the details. So if there's, without any further ado, I'll hand you back to Mary, and I think we're going to do some questions.
Yeah, thanks. All right, can I ask Jared and Shula and Michaela to join us now? So we're going to open it up now for some questions. Anything you'd like to ask our 3 speakers?
Any questions out there that you'd like to? We've got them up here ready and waiting for your questions.
I didn't get the actual passage. I don't know, I didn't hear it. I don't know if it's
Micah 6:8. What does the Lord your God require of you, O mortal, but to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Thanks for the memory verse. Yes.
Yes, up the back. Pardon? Please, yeah.
I'd like to say, ask questions Blake Middle from Principal from Carmel College. I was just wondering, from a Jewish perspective, there's the line "will humbly with God." From a Jewish perspective, how do you think, from a Jewish perspective, that fits in, considering the hatred of Jews throughout a lot of the 20th century in regards to the Second World War?
I'm not sure I understand the question. How do we reconcile walking humbly with God with regards to the Holocaust?
Exactly.
I don't know if I'm giving this a Jewish perspective, I'm giving this a shorter perspective. When I'm asked how do I think about the Second World War, and I will say that my husband is the grandson of 4 survivors, and even though my grandparents fled before the war, my grandmother's entire family was gone. But I think the bigger question is not how do we walk humbly with God, it's where was man in the Holocaust? God gives man free will, and that free will is absolute. So it's not about where was God in the Holocaust, it's where was America? You know, where was, how did humanity allow that to happen when we knew what was going on? And even after the war, during the Nuremberg trials, they only prosecuted Nazis for crimes that happened once they invaded Poland. So had the Nazis just decided to kill all the Jews in Germany, that would have been considered a problem that was for sovereign Germany. You know, for a long time the world prioritised a country's sovereignty over what is good and what is right. So I don't ask where was God, I ask where was man. Because in not asking where is man, where was man, we are giving man a free ride, and we cannot do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jared, in your very moving speech, you mentioned that we are haunted by the same ache of, I put love, because I'm a bit captivated by what you're saying, and surely you also mentioned love as an expression of deed. I was wondering, Jared, if you could sort of define your expression of love, your definition of love in the same, being from the same passage.
Something that children can share in common is that my Jewish ancestors also migrated before the Shoah on my mum's side. And for a Hebraic imagination, unlike the Hellenistic imagination, so for a Jewish way of saying instead of a Greek way of saying, story is everything. You don't boil down stories into points. Points or essences become the thing which actually open up stories. And so when we read in like 1 John 4, dearly beloved, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Those who love know God and are born of God. Those who do not love do not know God, because God is love. The next verse is how do we know what love is? God sent His one and only begotten Son. And so it's a narrative telling that brings us into the story. So love is actually a way of naming in a little suitcase that you can carry around a whole story from creation through the Exodus to Sinai, through the prophet Micah, who we've been spending time with this afternoon, for those of us who claim the gospel through Calvary in light of the resurrection, it's a way of saying. So love for me is nothing other than what we see in brown skin, Palestinian Jew living under occupation, be it Roman, in the first century. And that is the danger and the challenge, is that it's not nearly as abstract as we want it to be. It's got everything to do with, as we talked about earlier, the person sitting next to you and how you respond.
Thank you. Anyone else?
That might be an answer to a question you haven't thought to ask, is that I was quite often asked in the last year about whether I was a religious person. And it's an interesting question given that it is a religious themed art prize, but I don't call myself a religious person. I had a Catholic, pretty standard Catholic upbringing, going to Catholic church, going to Catholic school, that sort of thing. But I think what I want to say about that is that this exhibition, like lots of stuff to do with religion in the Bible, is about interpretation. And it's really important that it's not always people inside interpreting, it's people outside. Yep. Yeah. So I think it's really, if you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm not actually that religious, and I don't know what you were quoting there, and who's Micah, and who. None of that actually matters. It's just your interpretation of what that means is as valid as anybody else's, whether they are brought up within the religious sort of places or not. So I just wanted to say that's a really a useful thing that I kind of worked out for myself, but yeah, it might be useful for you.
That's a great point, Michaela. Thank you. Do you want to add to that or not? Right?
I've got a question for Michaela. I've never met you before, but if artists need help with their artist statements, where might they go?
So seriously speaking, I think that's a Dorothy Dixon statement. I'm doing a workshop on how to write an artist statement, which, if anybody needs help with artist statements, it's very happy to help.
Rochelle.
Oh, okay. There's a lot of photographers around Perth. We have a friend who's a photographer. My husband's a graphic designer, so we work with a lot of photographers. But I chose one who I thought could get the best out of my work. So I think if you're looking for a photographer, have a look on their website, have a look at their work, and see the kind of thing that they do, and think they'll be really good for my work. So this guy's a guy called Richard Gale, and I knew he would spend the time, and he has the kind of not only the technical skill to photograph glass and mirror, but also a really nice aesthetic. So yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Christy, could you just say the name of the library?
Rose Seminary. I can give you the details when we break for our meeting.
Yes.
Could you just elaborate a little bit about what that library is and what we should be going to see?
Okay, let me just go back because so I think
So Vos Library is a significant theological collection at the service of the people of Perth and beyond. It has a particularly strong collection in biblical studies, exploring a broad range of theological traditions. Vos is delighted to make our resources available and to offer membership to artists who are considering submission of artwork to the Manton Art Award. We are confident our expertly curated resources will assist the artist's reflection on this biblical scripture. So that's Vos Seminary is in Bentley. So I'll give you the. Want to write down the details? I can do that. So it's 20 Hayman Road in Bentley. And if you want to look at their website, it's Vose, spelled VOSE.edu.au. And Bridget Barry is the library manager there.
So everybody
Yeah, so everyone that's got their emails on the list there, I can send those details for you.
Another question? Up the back.
Would you like to speak? Sorry.
Bridget's actually in the house. Here we go.
Thanks for the question. First library is it's a seminary. Pardon me. That's better. We support the theological education of people. All sorts of theological education. What would you find? A simple place to start. We have commentaries, works of reflection on all areas of theology. The Baptists, we're under the care of the Baptists, have a very strong biblical, we're strong in the biblical area. So we would have commentaries, books that you could borrow. We'd have online resources that you can look, that you can use. We have reference works that you can dig through. We have a space that you can look at books in, or membership that you can take books out of as well. We're expecting to arrange an afternoon tea in a month or so. We can come and we can introduce you to the works. You don't need to wait for that. You contact me in the meantime and we can organise a membership or access if you're interested in doing it.
Thank you. Any more questions before we break for some afternoon tea? Okay, well, thank you all of you for attending today. It's a wonderful show up of people on this Sunday afternoon. So we do thank you. We thank the speakers, Jared, Shula and Michaela, and I think we have something small for you. And now we invite you to have some afternoon tea and speak to any of the guest speakers, but also our board, who, would you like to, well, some are already standing. Hands up to the board members. If you'd like to ask any further questions, we'll be milling around. And thank you again. And this will be on our website for any of your friends who couldn't make it today. Certainly by the end of the week, middle of the week, we're hoping, yeah. So thanks again.